So after those first projects, what are we looking at in the midterm? So one of the ideas is a really strong pedestrian corridor that connects the 3 rail transit stations in Midtown. A walking corridor that has a high level of design to connect those stations that's very direct, that has very safe and protected crossings of streets like 10th Street and 14th Street, and potentially has a real connection to the Arts Center and the sort of arts community of Midtown, theater, and all of the arts opportunities. Really the idea of kind of an art walk that's beautiful and safe and interesting and innovative, and something that we think has a lot of promise and potential. A redesign of 17th Street, and this one's pretty simple. It's really the idea of putting all of the stuff that's happening on 17th Street in the place where it makes the most sense. Taking the bus lanes or the busway and moving it to the center of the street, along with the stops and stations being in the center as well. Keeping the bike lanes on the outside of the street where most people are expecting to see bike lanes, and eliminating some of that confusion that people have when you're driving towards Atlantic Station. You're like, am I supposed to be in the bus lane? Am I not supposed to be in the bus lane? Just getting all that to make a little bit more sense, be a little bit more organized. It seems pretty simple, but one of the things that makes big swaths of Midtown unwalkable is that the traffic's moving really fast on the streets, and even if there's a painted crosswalk, there are not a lot of protected crosswalks. So a system of adding protected, signalized crosswalks at numerous locations throughout Midtown so that you're never more than 600 feet or so from a safe crossing of the street. That's really what you need for a walkable urban environment, not to have to not be able to walk more than 500 or 600 feet to be able to cross the street in a way that feels and is safe. So that's what this system is. It's systematically going through, finding those places where you have those big gaps in the network and creating safe and protected crosswalks for people to get across the streets. You've seen some of these ideas on Spring and West Peachtree and Piedmont, but this is going ahead and moving through and completing a full connected bike network for Midtown. So what you see in the green is a low stress network. Those are basically those buffered kinds of lanes that are good for 8 to 80 kind of people. And in the yellow are other connective parts of that bike system. So you can see a huge amount of coverage, a real connectivity to the system. It's really, this is a system that wouldn't be out of place in Portland or Minneapolis or some of the really great biking cities in North America in terms of the level of design of these bike facilities, the spacing and frequency of these bike facilities. So completing this out in that midterm, we had a lot of those projects in the short term, really getting it fully built out and completed in that midterm as part of the recommendation here. A 15th Street bridge. So this bridge does a lot of things. That 15th Street extension we saw before, this takes it all the way over the freeway, connecting the east side to the west side. If you're in a car and making a short local trip, it gets you out of the mess on 14th Street and the interchange kind of stuff that's happening there. If you're a bike or a pedestrian, it gives you a bridge that's designed for your needs and for your purposes rather than just sort of having some leftover space across a car freeway bridge. And this bridge also has the opportunity to connect to the downtown connector with managed lanes. So whether those be HOV lanes or whether they be HOT, toll kinds of lanes that can give other people opportunities to work their way around congestion and potentially create revenue. There's a lot of opportunity there to create some options that get around some problems that are really going to be, we're going to be stuck with for a while, like 14th Street interchange. This is something that was in one of the Beltline sub-area plans, but really has applicability to Midtown, even though it's not in Midtown. So this is up at Monroe Drive on the Buford Highway connector. This is when you look at the Google data of when you see the big red lines growing, starting at 4 o'clock and growing and growing and growing, this is where it starts. So it's, you've got those on and off ramps that you go to and from Piedmont, and then you've got the Monroe Drive, and they're too close together. They create this weaving condition that really starts to shut things down much more quickly than other places. And the really simple part of this is where you see that green triangle, taking out that little on and off ramp there, and just moving that on ramp up to the loop ramp that goes around that apartment building right now as you get onto Piedmont. It cleans up that weaving movement. It moves that choke point a little further up. And one of those sort of, those choke points that are outside of Midtown, it's a fairly simple and effective way to clear up one of those external issues. And again, this is in keeping with the street framework plan for Beltline and the redevelopment that's envisioned for a walkable district for that entire neighborhood. So it's something that's consistent with that neighborhood's plan and the city's policies as well. Looking at another great pedestrian connection over the freeway at Peachtree Place. So you can see in the green line, parallel to 10th Street. Again, finding a way for bikes and pedestrians not to have to get into the mix on 10th Street, have another way to get across the connector in ways that feel safer and much more comfortable. There's even the discussion and the idea about closing up the gap between those and creating a sort of freeway cap, somewhat like you see on 5th Street, where there's even more green space and amenity. There's obviously cost implications to that. There's some sort of engineering implications in terms of how the ramps work and things that still have to be worked out, but a lot of opportunity with this project. And so that bridge might look something like this, a way for the bikes and the peds to get out of the mix and the uncomfortableness that comes on 10th Street. And so that takes us to the longer range efforts, the things that have value and have merit, but that either have a lot of cost or some real technical issues to work out. So one of those that's been talked about for many years is an infill rail station at Pershing Point. The real deal killer on this for years has been cost. The tracks are really deep at that point, or the tracks are flat, but the ground goes up when you go up above WSB and up to the top of the hill there. So getting down to where a station would be has been challenging, and the tracks also start to curve there, which creates challenges for a station. But we think as that area potentially redevelops over time, there may be opportunities in the way that those sites are graded, the way that they're put together, to work with the private sector. And we feel like this is something that we want to take one more look at and one more crack at to see if there is some opportunity to get an infill station in a place where we have a lot more opportunity for attracting passengers than we do at some of the end-of-the-line stations that MARTA is looking at in the more far-flung suburbs. We talked earlier about West Peachtree and Spring Street and taking a lane away to create that cycle infrastructure. The Connect Atlanta plan that was created in 2008 contemplated those being two-way streets, and we still think long-term this is achievable and is a good idea. As we start to create these transit opportunities, these biking opportunities, these walking opportunities, we expect that more people will take those opportunities and get out of their cars, and we'll talk about that in some detail in just a second. As that happens, and if we're able to bring those vehicle counts down, having those three-lane streets and converting them to two-way, we feel like is an opportunity. As people start to get the options, start to use them, we can have this be a phase 2 for each of those streets to convert them to two-way, to make them even calmer, more friendly for retail, more friendly for the street life that we want to create along them. That also would potentially create the opportunity to build out the grid in North Midtown, so where we've got the flyover, the troll bridge, some people call it, to get on the Beaufort Highway connector, looking at taking that bridge down, creating more of a street grid in the north part of Midtown, and creating the redevelopment, the street life, and the walkability in that part of Midtown that we will have in others. We've looked at some projects that are really just looking at ways to manage those big traffic bottlenecks. And so one of them is what's called a Texas Uturn, which really just takes some of the traffic that's getting hung up and tied up, creates another way for them to go and up to North Avenue, curve back to where they're trying to get to, clear up some congestion and get them a little more directly to where they're trying to go without mucking up the surface streets that everyone else is trying to use. So again, long-term sorts of ideas that potentially are worth exploring the funding and the feasibility. So, none of these are free, either in terms of dollars or in terms of the use of the system. While we talked about Peachtree not having a big impact in taking one lane away, there is a bit of impact. And so one of the things from the beginning is we said that the streets aren't going to be able to do 100% perfectly everything we want them to do. We're going to have to make some decisions about what we're going to give and what we're going to take. Part of our doing that was to build a computer model or use a computer model of the entirety of Midtown and take all of those projects I just mentioned to you, code them into the model, and see what would happen to traffic if we do all that stuff. So the answer is, not a whole lot happens to traffic. There are, for example, on Spring and West Peachtree, you get, during the peak heaviest times of the day, between 1 and 2 minutes of additional travel time going from downtown to Midtown. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. But that 1 or 2 minute trade-off in travel time at the peak of the peak during the day gets us all of these other system amenities that you see, all these other opportunities that you see. So that was something that was important for us to check and make sure that the things that we were proposing as an entire system didn't have very catastrophic trade-offs for the way that people get around when they do need to use a car. One of the reasons this is true is that despite the fact that I just spent 25 or so minutes showing you all of this stuff we could do with repurposed lanes, that's only about 8% of the lane miles in Midtown that we're talking about repurposing for something other than driving. And that 8% doesn't even include the things like the 15th Street Bridge and the other things that we're proposing putting in that would actually bring that number down a little bit more. So that's part of the reason this works, is that there's a good grid. We're not taking a whole lot of that grid offline to do all of these really transformational kinds of things that we're talking about. So it's a real opportunity that Midtown has and can capitalize on to create an even better place than what they've had before.